Welcome to the Change Energizer Hot Seat podcast. This is the show where leaders step into the hot seat to reveal their trust decisions behind extraordinary success. I'm your host, Scott Carley, the Trust Energizer. Every day, clients and teams make critical decisions based on trust. They decide who they'll hire, who they'll promote, who they'll follow, who they'll partner with, and who they'll invest in. Today, my guest is John Spencer of Clear Direction. He works with founder-led companies, private equity firms, and family offices. You call John when you want to strengthen revenue performance and build a more valuable business. Join me now as I take him through Can I Trust You? The silent question every one of your clients are asking. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on here.
Hey, man, we're just so glad to have you here, John. You and I have known each other, 15 years?
Oh, I don't know. Some period of time like that. I don't think I came to Austin in 2013, so probably not that long after that. But
yeah, I don't know, boy. It's been a long time.
Yeah,
we've crossed lanes and networking and business, and you invited me to join Provisors, and you're the president of our chapter, and then. You also, I'm a part of ACG, and now you're president of ACG, and so you and I are rubbing shoulders a lot. And
we are, yeah.
I'm just glad that you're here today.
Well, it kind of goes with your theme, doesn't it, Scott? You know, who do you know, like, and trust? And I don't think it's an accident that you're an officer while I'm president of ACG, that you're on my executive committee and my group at Provisors and these type of things. You begin to see who you can rely on, right, and who you trust to, with the relationships, I've developed, and now you've developed with Provisors and ACG. I can't just put any turkey up there. It's got to be people that can, meet the whatever the mantras of the group, what the thesis is of the group. So, you don't just get that because you show up. I got to be selective on who I put in those responsibilities. So I hope that's kind of a backhanded compliment, I guess.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
You're not a turkey.
Yeah, thank you very much. I love working together, and I've watched you, and you have ramped up the energy in ACG and have really got us focused on growing that group. And you've done the same thing at Provisors. And, I like to work side by side with people who are successful and making the magic happen. High trust credit scores, all that is important.
These are like a nonprofit and a not-for-profit or what. You don't make any money from these things, right? But the same skill sets, that we use to build businesses and listen to people and see where the strengths and weaknesses are. I mean, if I'm going to give my time to something like Provisors, ACG, for example, or whatever group, it's got to be worth my while too, in a sense that, I want to be surrounded by quality people, and it's got my name on it now to some degree, right? I'm kind of, I'm putting my stamp of approval, my trust on that. And I'm telling everybody, hey, come with me. This is something worth your time. That's not secondary. That's primary. So if I see something that I don't think is up to, at least I'd say, John Spencer standards, I'm going to work with the team to get us there. But, and I think that comes back. I was really fortunate, Scott, my early career as an Air Force officer for 10 years. And you learn really quickly, because in the Air Force, you can't hire and fire people like you can in public sector. Whoever they give you, that's who you got to work with. So you have to judge what the mission is and what those people can do for the mission. Private sector can be quite different in that sense. In fact, I'll share with you, leading a little bit about this with some of the founder-led companies I deal with. They tend to still operate that way, almost like a nonprofit. And they keep a lot of people around due to loyalty. May not be the most positive thing for the organization. So I don't know how much you want to get into that, but that's one of the biggest problems I solve for in founder-led companies, is moving them from what I'll call nicely a loyalty-based organization to performance-based. And the truth is, when you do that, you start bringing accountability into an organization. Some of those folks that are quite comfortable in that old system, they'll self-eliminate.
You just called out an elephant in the room, and something that in the last few years recently I've come across is companies are now saying, they used to say, we're just a big family, and we love each other and we're a big family. And then consultants, people like me and others are coming out and say that you don't need to call yourself a family. You need to call yourself a team, because it's hard to tell a family member you're not being productive like you need to be. But you can look a team member right in the eye and say, we're not scoring touchdowns because you're not catching passes.
Well, what I find that a lot of these folks try to build, quote unquote, that family open door, whatever moniker they want to put on it, because they want to ask more than they're paying for from those people. See,
Yeah.
that dysfunction of your business as your family works both ways. We had a thing in the military called fraternization, right? So it's okay for everybody to be friendly, and you want as a leader to be liked by your organization and trusted, and by the folks that are under you. But there's a line there somewhere where you're the boss and they're not. And realize that everybody else in the organization, this is why it becomes so dysfunctional. It's not just because that core relationship we're talking about with boss to subordinate. It's because the other people you add to that mix, or the people that are in the organization, see that too. And they think the only way to success isn't merit, isn't performance, it's through my relationship with a key person, right? And
Yeah.
and what you find oftentimes, like when I get engaged, and we and I agree with the CEO that we're going to put accountability in place, and they want to achieve certain things for their company. Some of these people get uncomfortable. What does this guy know about our business, and what we have here is special? And he doesn't, da da da. Cult. They use the word culture. And then they can is a they throw all that. You get the full guns and missiles, as I say. And then I tell the CEO, this is what's going to come at you, so they know it. So we're not surprised when it happens. And some of their key people, these are people that have built their business that they trust. I said, they don't have to go anywhere. We just have to communicate more effectively. We have to be aligned as leaders that, we love you. We want you to be part of where we're going, but this is where we're going. And this is what your job is. This is what it means to do your job well. And this is what the job pays. Do you want the job? Period. Because the job you think you had doesn't exist here anymore. We're not going another direction. And what you find is when these people self-eliminate, and sometimes, unfortunately, also have to be let go after a certain pattern of behavior that everybody else in the organization seems to go, oh, thank God, we didn't think that person would ever leave.
John, that's
They're
a lot of what
not.
the trust credit score is based on. It's based on behavior and performance. And based on behavior and performance, you develop a reputation that you're somebody who is productive, bring energy, have
That's
expertise,
it.
or you're not at some level. John, you just came from the Texas Two-Step. And, that's a ACG event where M&A deals are happening, and you're very active in provisors. Tell us about what your perspective is on what's going on in the M&A world.
Well, it's broad, obviously. One of the things that people often have this narrow view of what M&A means, mergers and acquisitions, but it's quite broad. It could be, I own a business and I'm selling it to my kid. It could be, all the way through, I've got a business, I've built it up, and banks are going to come in and invest money in it, and then private equity is going to take it, and we're going to go public, IPO. It could be, just it's a very broad spectrum, right? So, but it's a broad tent, and it's a good thing. But the fundamentals are there, much like they are with any kind of relationship. The fundamentals of a seller and a buyer, and that's what the two-step means. It's an analogy to the Texas dance that people were dancing with one another, partners.
Yeah.
We also have we have another thing called Texas Capital Connection. We have DealMax, National First, ACG, not to overplay the ACG, Association for Corporate Growth moniker, which is a global organization that I happen to be president of right now for Austin and San Antonio. But what it does is it does formalize an understanding of people and make sure people are aware of this broad ecosystem. So one of the trends I'm seeing, Scott, that are being reported back, the private equity, the investor class of our world really have a lot of money to invest, and they're having a hard time finding companies that are worthy of buying. And the companies they do buy are not hitting thesis. What that means is, I buy you, and I tell the investors that invested in me, we're going to fix this company up and sell it in 3 to 5 years. Well, that 3 to 5 has become 5 to 7 years, with some caveats. And so while I have a lot more money to put in there, it's hard to find. It's been harder to find true winners, and part of that is the fairy tale land we all lived in of free money, because money was essentially didn't cost anything for a long time. So they had free money to play with. Now money costs something, right? Each seems the treasury bills and all this kind of stuff, right? And And so you have a situation now where you think they'd be more discerning. But what's happening, in fact, is a lot of the investors are going from, well, we only buy people that are 5 million or 10 million or 20 million EBITDA. They're going down to $1 million EBITDA. In some cases, they're buying businesses that are losing money. They're not fundamentally, so their thesis is shifting because they've got all this money to put to work, and it's an accumulation tactic. They just want to accumulate and take pieces off the board in some cases. So there's a lot. So just if you're a seller and you think that you've got somebody helping you, say an M&A advisor, and they're giving you this rationale of how to dress your business up and bought, you should stay with those fundamentals, because the things that make a business fundamentally valuable are the things that just make you run your business well, right? And so if you're doing those things, there's no downside, because you're going to exit your business one way or the other at some point. So you might as well, dress it up, if you will, and also achieve, make more money and grow, or whatever you're trying to achieve. But necessarily when you get to the deal table, the thing that shocked me was those fundamentals might be used against you if they're weak. They won't necessarily be a positive. So there is a bit of what they call the art of the deal in this thing. So if you think about in terms of here's where you are and here's what you want, or here's what the buyer wants. If you're the seller or the buyer, you've got this desired outcome, and you've got I want this EBITDA and I want this return, I want this exit or whatever. I want this much money for my business, whatever it is up here. Deals are won or lost down here. Just like sales, just like life. They're won and lost down here by, if you will, somewhat the emotion, but it's the intangibles. When I go to sell my business and you're offering me a lot of money to it, can I trust you? And what does that mean? I'm second or third generation owner. I'm selling my business, and all these people in the company, this community has that's my reputation. And if I sell to you, am I going to erode all that? When I see them at HEB next week, is that going to be a problem? This does weigh on their mind. And people have told me, in fact, we just had a speaker at ACG last month. It was a fantastic guy, because this is really his scenario. Third generation, sold the business, private equity sold it again, and then it went public, in combination with other groups. So he ran that, and he stayed on as the CEO, and then as part of that group buying companies, right? So he had the whole thing in there. And he constantly went back to, how does that reflect the values of my family, even though I don't own the business anymore? And I would tell you, I would say specifically him, but in some cases what he did tell me, because now he's been on the buyer and seller side, and he has an intimate view, that people will necessarily take less money and get a better deal for the people that work there and for their legacy. Legacy becomes important at a certain point. Trust me, they're making money, but they also want to have, and sometimes maybe the business world forgets that the best numbers aren't it. Who am I selling to? And so they tend to push back, and the whole deal falls in on itself, because the seller's asking questions about what will happen to my people and what will happen to my business and what will happen, and the other side goes, that's not your concern.
I think part of what you're saying and fighting against is, we've heard on the media that people who are selling businesses are just ruthless and they don't care about anybody. They just want to take all the money they can and run. And that's not the case all the time. There are people who have built a second and third generation business. They care about the key people who got them there, and they want to make sure. Well, when we were at Two Step, there was a panel up there, and I loved it. One guy said, "So you're a banker, you're private equity. Who do you write checks for?" And, well, we write checks that are $1 million or less to help companies. Next guy over, well, we start at $1 million and write it up to $50 million. And then the guy on the end said, we only write checks for legacy companies whose family name we want to keep intact. Yeah. And I thought that was so cool. All that was going on at the Two Step.
So, and what it is on a macro level, it's exactly how we sell on a more, whatever you're selling. You try to find the right client. How does the client buy? The third example you gave oftentimes is a family office versus private equity. The family office tends to buy and hold things as they are. They treasure what they bought. They invest more in it, and they don't intend to sell it necessarily. They may hold that thing for 10, 20, 30 years. It becomes part of their portfolio. Private equity, oftentimes, like I said, they have a timeline of a commitment back to investors and whatever, right? So it's a different, and I'm broadly generalizing, right? There's
Sure.
variances, degrees of all this, but I think that's the question, I'd ask is like, who do you want to sell to in that model? And what's more, if I'm the family office, I buy your company, we'd like you to remain as the CEO to ensure that that culture that we're buying stays in place. What's the downside? Oh, and guess what? We'll give you millions of dollars to do all the things you need to do that you couldn't have done. Okay, and it's like, oh my God, that compared to, or somebody else will just pay you 30% more now and you're out. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes, to be fair, there's things you can't control. Health comes into play, the 5 Ds, divorce, and so forth. All these other things come into play. So, there's a spectrum there. But let's taking it back to earth here for a second. When we deal with people, when I train and engage and coach companies, sometimes that's all I'm doing is helping the sales team get a little better. Usually, I'm helping to get the CEO better, get their mind out of the company. Hopefully, at best, we're transforming that company. What I have to get across, whether they're selling a $300 subscription to something once a year, or a $300,000 something, or a $3 million something, the process underlying how somebody buys is roughly the same. Similar, I should say. Yeah.
You're actually going into the next question that I wanted to ask
Okay,
you.
go ahead.
So I want you to,
I don't need to lead the witness.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's okay. Tell the audience what you do and who you serve. I mean, you've been telling them, but get
Yeah.
specific now. You tell us what you do. When would I call John Spencer?
So writ large, what I tell people is 2 to 100 million in revenue. So it's really post revenue, and they start having problems of scale, basically, or challenges. As a founder CEO, you get to a certain point and the company outgrows your ability. You become the constricting point in the company is the first thing we're dealing with. So maybe you're from 1 million trying to get to 3 million. So that's the first one, 3 million to 9, whatever it is. So you need somebody to come in here to help give you advice, advisory, coaching. I call another adult in the room. Or you need somebody to, no kidding, who has done it before like me many times, build the infrastructure. Build the team, hire the team, or at least the processes and procedures, the CRM, whatever it is, the infrastructure for where we're going. And then finally, the last level, and I have a program called Ascent that brings you through this. Now we need to get you as a CEO out of the sales seat completely, or at least what are the key leadership. They need to elevate, be a visionary integrator, whatever it might be. And now we need to bring in somebody into this. And so I come in as a VP of sales, chief revenue officer. I embed on a fractional basis, and I become the sales leader. Everybody reports to me. I'm their boss, full hire and fire. I spend your money without asking you that whole bit. And we begin to show what that looks like. With the objective being that I'll elevate somebody and the team will develop somebody, or we'll hire somebody and then I'll exit at some point. That's usually a 12 to 24 month process done correctly. Could be longer, could be shorter.
You are the outsider who's coming in and catches the pulse of the company, and they're at 3, they want to go to 5 or 6 or 7 million, and you have to install some things. But your whole point is to install those things and get everything running and then exit.
And ideally, I'm doing that at the highest level for the company. But the truth is that the best success is when we're doing it together with the CEO, when there's alignment, obviously, or alignment with the other senior leaders. And so I may be and have been the first executive they've ever hired. They've never really had an executive. They kind of grew up into the business, and they've never had, because I was I was an Air Force officer, Fortune 2. I was at GE when they were number 2, So big companies, teams of teams, billions of dollars. And now you're dealing with these, between, like I said, $2 to $100 million companies, different structure, right? They don't need all that capability those companies have necessarily. But they do need the fundamental, again, which is if you're the leader, I need you to be up in the visionary world. I don't, I need you thinking about what's next, not, did Johnny come to work today? What's our next customer? Hey, did that transaction get done?
All of that is you're not after their job.
I'm not after their job. Typically, I'm not part of their cap table, meaning I'm not asking for ownership of the company. I wouldn't say never necessarily. Who knows what might come at me. But conversely, I probably would not take a variable compensation or retainer for about 4 quarters either, until it's my system, my people, why should I take the risk? It's kind of the logic. Because I want them to understand that I'm not the hired help here. I'm not a worker. I'm not just a cheap way to hire a VP of sales. I'm there to transform their organization. There are people out there who do that. That's not how I market myself. I do that, but the objective is that behind the closed doors with the leadership, changing their mentality, aligning around a strategy to take them to the desired outcome, 3 years out or whatever it might be. So you have to have it. It's because of my broad background across domains that allows me. It really doesn't. The domain doesn't matter to me. It does to them sometimes. But I've been in almost every domain, meaning I can pick up enough on their business, but I don't focus on. If I'm having to tell a CEO how to do their primary job or service their primary customer, they probably aren't ready to hire me yet. They're constantly, it's hard, it's rarely a one visit close, for lack of a better term, with me and my clients.
Oh,
We're having
yeah.
a series of discussions, right? But I would also tell you that they're looking for competency. They want to make sure I'm competent. That gives them assurance. But why they would work with me or not, engage with me or not, is it somebody that they want to spend a lot of time with?
Yeah.
Am I aligned with their values? Am I aligned with where they want to go? Am I a person that they can trust putting in front of their people of the company they built and said, I endorse John to do this?
That's signal number three. Credibility and core values and integrity, all those things, they don't have to exactly match, but they've
Right.
got to be pretty close or we're not going to work together long
Well,
term.
we say service before self. You probably heard that kind of terminology before. We did that in the
Yeah.
military, and I'm part of I'm licensed by a group called Sales Acceleration. That's a big part of their core values as well. And I'd like to think that's the case. I think, if anything I'm guilty of, I get accused of the scope creep. I give them more than they're paying me for is what I get accused of by other consultants. But, sometimes you got to do what's necessary, right? Because you're dealing with people. And the reality is that these people are in a lot of cases are reporting me, the people that they've assigned to me, I'm their boss. And
Yeah.
so that isn't 9 to 5. That's when they need you. And the same thing for the CEOs. When there's an issue, you have to be there. So regardless of what we may have decided we were going to spend time next week, we may find we're spending 5 days together. So even though I'm fractional, for example, and it might be 20% of my time or whatever the contracted thing is, that might be 100% of my time for some period of time. And so
Yeah.
it's variable, right? Because when you take that ownership on, that's why I'm not like you give me a thing and I'm delivering it like a piece of art or something. You can't be a leader and be there conditionally. You have to.
Yeah. I worked for a client in Houston, and his famous saying is, Scott, we got to move the needle. I mean, the needle has got to move. And that was the way he judged almost everything. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Change Energizer Hot Seat. We're taking this to local companies and conferences around town. If your company would like to bring me in to do a hot seat episode, just like we're doing right now, bring one of your key leaders, putting them on the hot seat and asking them 7 or 8 questions about, can I trust you? And let them vet and showcase why they are trustworthy, then give me a call. Reach out to the Change Energizer and let's get into your company and let's really raise the roof, raise the temperature a little bit with the Trust Energizer Hot Seat. Well, let me ask you a few questions because, man, I want to get you moving in this direction. How do you create accountability and urgency without transferring the company's internal pressure to the customer?
What we want salespeople to understand is that you want to have urgency and follow through all those things you can imagine when you want to sell. But it's not a good sell. It's not a good fit if the client's not ready to buy. In other words, you need to make sure you're qualifying somebody because you could actually have a much bigger sell down the road. Some people take the opposite, just get something and then you land and expand. There's some truth to that. But, what I want my sales team to understand is I'm going to give them how to qualify somebody. But if they're not right, if they don't have money, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? So you have those normal qualifications around, do they have budget? Do they have authority? That kind of thing. But if people are just not feeling it, now that's where the real sales comes into, is training them. Sometimes they have to go back to discovery. And if the person otherwise would need this service, has the ability to pay, and isn't still coming through, then maybe they don't trust you, or you haven't made your case, or you haven't really uncovered what they're really concerned about. So again, you've delivered up here all day long, right price, right product, competency, but you haven't delivered down here. Are they operating out of fear? Are they operating with? And so trying to get people to understand, again, even at small transactional amounts, that's still how people buy. $10. Although I don't have all the science behind it, I can tell you that if I'm making a $3 decision and there's 20 different gums in front of me or whatever, whatever you're buying, soft drink, you see, go to Buc-ee's and look at the beverages, how are you, right? You're making a decision based on emotion somewhere because they all cost the same. Why did you buy this one, not this one, right? To some degree, if you've never had them before or whatever the analogy you want to use. And so we tell people that it's okay if you've totally qualified somebody, realize that some people are reticent to buy because of their beliefs on money.
There's a phrase that I hear from time to time. There's a big deal in perception, not just vocabulary, but perception. Is this an investment or a cost?
That's it. So you have to come back. I'll give you an example. I had a client not too long ago, it was pest control. And if you find somebody that's got termite, what exactly are we thinking about here? I mean, or if you had rats running around in your attic or whatever, I got to think about it if I want those caught or not. Probably not, but still, people would do that. What are you going to shop around? I mean, you're not going to find anybody cheaper to go get those rats out of your attic. So I'm like, there's something else going on. Like they just don't like the cut of your jib, maybe, or whatever, right? So you have to kind of do an analysis of how did you approach them? How did you develop rapport? How did you communicate our program to them? Because they clearly have a need, there's urgency, all those things that you look for. So we talk about what do you do to make sure that the pressure for the company to perform internally isn't put on the client, isn't transferred to the client. That's a tough one sometimes because people do have numbers. The truth is salespeople, more than anybody else in the company, probably have the clearest accountability. In fact, everybody in the organization, regardless of the size of the company, knows that Bob isn't hitting his number. They don't know that about the CFO. They don't know this about the CEO. They don't know this about Betty in accounting. But they know that this guy's not making his number, right? Because he was supposed to do $1 million. The other thing is if he doesn't sell $1 million, they don't get bonuses, or we can't buy the new truck, or whatever it is. So it has company-wide impact and import. So everybody's got this. Everybody in the organization, the guy's got the internal pressure to hit the number. He's got his own pocketbook. He's got a mortgage to pay, and he's got the customer expectations or the client expectations as well. So that's why, I'll give you one little side path. I find people sometimes in sales roles that are selling that really are not inherently salespeople, because it is not an easy job. And you can fake it a little bit, but behaviorally, you're either one of these people or you're not, that can deal with all this pressure, can carry the load, and carry the weight of what it is, the rejection, all those other things, and just every no is just one more you're out of the way to get to the yes.
There almost has to be some kind of check and balances. And really, that takes us to the next question I was going to ask you. Where do you draw the line between appropriate persuasion and manipulation in sales? Because, all of us sometimes are starting to feel manipulated. We feel commission breath. But so how do you do that? Where do you draw the line? Or what do you talk to how do you tell your sales team?
The easiest ones are these outliers where they have a clear need. The house is on fire. Do you want my fire extinguisher? I'm here. Here's the fire extinguisher. And I didn't jack up the price. Why are they still not going with it, right? Obviously manipulation has negative terminology to it, but I also caveat that with the customer's not always right.
That's correct.
Right? Because if you think about it now, one of the things that has changed in all markets is how the client buys, that we're doing about 80% of our investigation before we even call a company or more. So by the time you come in, it's like how many of our doctors that we see come in and have to listen to the patient tell the doctor what's wrong with them. I mean, it's the same thing, right? So you're selling whatever it is you're selling, and you come in. So, that line between manipulation and persuasion can somewhat be gray because you're going to have to say, I'm the expert at this. I'm telling you your house is falling down, and this is what a peer costs to replace. And you're trying to negotiate this, and I'm telling you there's no negotiation. Do you want this date or this date? How do you want to pay me? It's is that manipulation? Is that a pressure tactic? Is that what are you going to shop around on Google and find 3 more engineers to tell you your house is about to fall? I don't know. I mean, so at some point there's a point where you're also wasting the salesperson's time. It's also not appropriate for our employees to be manipulated, and that's what in fact, it's funny. It seems like that's more of a trend also of how clients buy. More and more, they are treating human sellers like we all have as far as regard to the AI sellers and the spam and everything else you see. These are real humans, and so, I can't have that either. I can't have somebody, so, while the perception might be manipulation versus persuasion, hopefully I've trained them enough to say, you're the subject matter expert. Diagnose, not the client, you are. Diagnose what it is. We have fair pricing for them, quote it correctly, bring in a partner if you need to, but don't offer less than what the client really needs. Conversely, don't oversell it because that'll bite you every time. You sell somebody a Cadillac when they wanted was a pickup truck, that euphoria lasts about, by the time they get it off the lot and when they realize they can't go to Home Depot, right?
Yeah,
so people
payment.
do this, right? It doesn't, both ways don't work it. So I think that's where the line really is were you a professional, assess what they really needed? Did you provide what they needed, at the fair price, right? You got to make a profit, otherwise it's not a business. Because always think about not this transaction, but the beginning of the relationship with the client. This is the beginning of a relationship. So the closer you can hit to what they really need, sometimes putting them under the comfort zone. No, I really don't need that. I just want to go for the good one. No, you have to have the better one.
About 2.5 years ago, my wife and I, we just built a new house out here in a new subdivision, 55 and older group. And, we went in with a mindset, but the salesperson, we're friends today because I never felt like I was trying to be sold something, but they did help me buy some things. And they helped me buy some things that were out of my comfort zone.
We say beliefs in money. So sometimes the buyers, but also sometimes the sellers' belief in money. I've had sellers who said, I said, why did you sell him this? He really needed this. Well, that seems really expensive to me. I'm like, oh my God, you're not helping the client because you think it's expensive.
Yeah.
The client needs that.
Yeah. Sometimes we have a frame in our own mind.
That's
and
right.
And what we can afford is not what they can afford, and they can afford so much more.
Buying a better system, the reality is you don't necessarily always get what you pay for, but there's usually an indication of quality. So that is what a salesperson at its best is, an advisor, a trusted advisor that knows what you need better than you do, as an expert, and is guiding you to the right decision.
What behaviors separate a trusted commercial advisor from a product pusher?
I think but Scott, that's not a small thing, right? Same thing, coming full circle back to our groups, our networking and referral groups. We call each other trusted advisors, and so that's what we're gauging. Does this person really know their craft? Attorney, banker, CPA, whatever it is. Can they articulate it to me? Can I trust them in front of my client or what have you, right? So unfortunately, sometimes, or fortunately, how you use a knife and fork, how you communicate with people does matter.
Of course it does.
I know that, right? I mean, you need to be human. In this age of AI, I'm not going to get to that whole thing, but I get a lot of, you talk about the arc of all the stuff I get involved in. Is AI going to put everybody out of business? No. Is AI, we just need a human in a loop? No, you need more than that. AI is something that should be embraced by and large. It's going to make you better, done at its best. At its worst, you've got the Terminator, I guess, or whatever, some extreme, But I think it's. But you can take that ingredient anywhere, you know. How much lawyering is enough lawyering? Well, it depends on the scenario, right? But I will tell you, the analogy that everybody uses is, I don't want the cheapest brain surgeon operating on me, right?
No, I love that illustration too. I mean, it really puts things into perspective immediately. So, how do you measure whether customers are trusting the sales organization? How can you tell?
So the organizations that I lead for these clients, well, there's an assessment phase I do, and that's one of the things I'm looking at is, I'll give you, here's a leading indicator, Scott. Let's say we have a lot of good leads coming in, and we give them to the sellers, and their close rate is very low.
Ooh.
Okay, so
Yeah, they don't trust.
So what? And if I've got 10 sellers and 3 of them have low and the others have very high, the quality of the leads are relatively the same. The conditions are relatively the same. There's a variance over here. These guys are doing something different. And sometimes it could be technique, but oftentimes it's something else. And if you listen to them or do ride-alongs, or if it's an outbound call and you can listen in, obviously, you'll see that typically they're doing something, to your point, to break the trust. They're pushing them into a solution that the client doesn't really need, or doesn't feel they need, or doesn't understand why they need, right? You'll see that kind of thing. Now, the other thing is, I can go before I come in and I can look at their 5-star ratings or Trustpilot or Google or what have you, and I can begin to see a trend here with that. The other thing I do is, very early on, is I spend one-on-one time with almost every employee in sales, outside of sales, and find out how do they really feel about the business. It's advanced. I mean, I do some pretty good interrogation.
Yeah, you're scanning for signals. You're
Signaling.
looking and everything you hear, see,
Right.
feel, notice, you're scanning for signals about trust.
There's something else that I'll tell you, that the M&A advisors, and whether it's M&A or I say, it's the same kind of a concept, which is, you might as well tell me up front where the cancer is or where the problem is, because I'm going to know everything about your business in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Everything. Things well beyond, why do you need to know that? That has to do with sales. Yeah, I need to know that too. I'm going to know your books. I'm going to know why somebody was hired and fired. I'm going to know about your agreement with clients. There's nothing I'm not going to find about. I'm extremely observant, and I will know everything. And if you're going to sell your business or if somebody's going to buy your business, they will know it all. And they will use that against you, the fact that you held it back. But for me, it just means that you're going to be paying me many more months, because I'm going to be running down this road. And so that trust, you talk about the trust, the most important trust is between me and the person that engages with me. Now, I understand there's a period of adjustment and know, like, and trust, and all that kind of stuff that has to happen. But at a certain point, I'm accountable to perform for them. I need to make sure the sales team's in place and performing equal or better in the short term, and long term, certainly better, right?
Yeah.
To do that, I'm going in based, if I want to move faster, I have to trust that the CEO that I'm working for has shared everything with me, that the picture that they've painted for me is accurate. Now, I'll continue doing my diligence. When I find out there's a gap between what they either perceive or have told me and is there, now I got to ask myself, are they clueless? Can I not trust them? Or what's happening here?
Yes. Yes. And that was another question that comes to my mind. And that was, how good are you at having those hard conversations?
One of the things, again, comes back to the military training called the let alone zap gap. You can say, well, I'm going to let that go. It's not that big of a deal. Normally they're pretty good. Well, that stuff comes back to get you every time. So the otherwise superior performer that one time forgot to put something back where it's supposed to be or what have you, that's literally, that's malfeasance on my behalf. Those little things are what matters. Those are things you can control. You can't control the economy and all this other stuff. But the things you can control, you're indicating to everybody in the organization up and down the chain, what you will accept as far as cutting corners to you or what have you. So that comes into the leadership thing, whether you're sales or what have you. Now, I'm not saying go overboard or what have you, but say, hey, you didn't put, oh yeah, okay, yeah, okay, it might be as simple as that. It might be, hey, we're not, I've told you this twice. There isn't going to be a third time. It could be that. And that could be from me to the CEO that's hired me. And I've had those discussions. Here's what's acceptable to me. You will not use me as cover for how you treat your people.
Right.
And if you do that in front of them, I will also let them know I'm not in favor of it in front of them. That what you're doing is not acceptable. Now, right now, we're having this discussion behind closed. You need to adjust your behavior. You need to understand this is two companies working together. I am not subordinate to you. I am not your employee. That's why you hire somebody like me, okay? Because you can't tell me what to do. In fact, you shouldn't tell me what to do. You should get somebody else. If you hire a consultant that you're telling them what to do, what are you doing? So the answer is I do. But what I'll tell you, I will share this, Scott, is that I was much more direct, 7 years ago when I started this. You got to remember, everybody in this organization is going through tremendous transition. I am a big fish in a small pond oftentimes, a lot of ripples, a lot of things are happening. So it's critical for me to pace myself on this. And the thing is so funny because I'm like slowing down oftentimes to adjust for the speed of the organization, the CEO. And then the CEO behind the scenes is saying, John, why are our sales up already? It's like, or whatever, why isn't this done already? So, and so I've had, I'd rather have that conversation than the opposite where I'm like pounding everybody,
One of the cool things that I figured out about the trust credit score was that we took an abstract concept, a feeling, a gut feeling, we calibrated it into numbers. So that in 5 areas, like let's say your attitude or your energy or your presence, on a scale of 1 to 10, you come in and you're at a 10 where you are it and great energy, or you're at a 5 where you're not much energy, or you're at a 2 where you don't have any energy. That makes a conversation much easier when I can say, you're at a 5, I need you at a 7 or an 8. What do we do to get you from a 7 to an 8? And your core values, man, you lied about your report. And that is almost a critical failure. But, I got you down here to a 4. You got to get incrementally back up to an 8.
My business is called clear direction for a reason. What I say in my language, what you're talking about is clarity. When people are very clear on what the job is, what the expectations are, they can move a lot faster. Now they may not even agree with some of the stuff, right? But there's no disagreement on what needs to be done and how to do it. There's just, there might be a difference on prioritization or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem, for people. When you talk about energy and sapping energy, you have people who will do just enough not to get fired. Okay. Right. And that, so you have to understand that, they haven't been dishonest in their mind because they didn't lie. They did what people asked, but that's actually a form of dishonesty in itself. And so I tell people, one of the things, whether it's leadership or what have you, there might be misunderstandings. I mean, you know why? Because people communicate differently because you don't have that alignment and trust and what have you. And so they only heard what you could hear. God, there's all kinds of studies on this. You could tell a room of 10 people the same thing, and they all have slightly different interpretations, especially if you play the telephone or what have you. So there's that possibility. You need to seek for understanding, what have you. But if somebody actually manipulates or purposely moves in a distrustful way, lack of integrity, lies, or what have you, operates in a bit dishonest way internally or externally with the company, I don't know that there's not much redemption. And if you tolerate that, what's the limit?
You erode the trust of the rest of the team. When leadership tolerates those kind of things, finally when they do fire that person or they quit, everybody says, what took you so long?
Well, no, that's if they get that opportunity. Because here's the other thing I tell people: they always say, "Well, I want you to focus on sales," and there are these things on the edges. Whether it's cybersecurity or whether it's HR policies or whatever, finance or whatever that runs a business that's not being addressed. There are things that just end your business, and one of these people that's operated habitually in a lack of integrity in your organization can cost you your company. Either through lawsuits or other things, right? Or whatever. I mean, one of the things that we see a lot of times is salespeople negotiating for a better job somewhere, downloading all of your information and taking it to another company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so,
I think you can go to prison for that.
no, a lot of people don't pursue that. They now there's some that have non-disclosure agreements and what have you, but even then they don't necessarily disclose them. If I hire somebody, he comes the first day and he's brought me all the inside information from their company, I don't want any of that, and we've hired the wrong person. That's why there's a probationary period. It's like I don't think how you can recover that because I can't teach that.
Well, John, we've had a lot of great discussions today. I mean, time has flown, and you've really given us a lot of great stuff to talk about. Is there anything that you would like to add as we wrap up, and anything else you want people to know about you? Call John Wynn. What is it?
I'd say it's a founder, CEO, or investor believes a company has a sales problem. They should probably call me before they try and solve it themselves by hiring another salesperson or sales leader. That's the biggest mistake I see because they're otherwise smart people. They read a book, they go and hire their own sales leader, and even in best cases, it doesn't always work. So before you do anything, it's worth having a conversation to get clarity on what the next step is. With or without me, you can at least get clarity. And that's what I would implore people to get a professional that's had such a broad experience as I have. If not me, then somebody. And I'll go anywhere, and as long as my passport takes me there. But I try and stay in Central Texas with, just because it's easier. And I think that's what I'd say. I'd say you're not alone. Don't try and solve this problem yourself. The best athletes or business leaders in the world aren't doing it alone. They have coaches, they have advisors, they have people that are helping them. Yeah, that's what I tell. Like the first 30 days, give me 30 days to go everywhere and do a deep. Because in about 60 days, I'm part of the problem. I'm kind of bought into whatever. So I said, I have these unvarnished ability to see the things you can't see, and you need to trust me that we're going to need that together moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. How do people get a hold of you? I want to hire you. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, my email is js@cleardirection.io. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. All my contact information is there. My website is also cleardirection.io, www. So you can find me on that as well.
Well, John, thank you so much. You're running 2 or 3 groups that I know about, and then some other groups I don't know about where you're, helping people, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. If you're listening today, and any of this resonates with you, get in touch with John Spencer. This is a guy who wants to help you. He is qualified. He is an expert. He's got a great track record. He's hitting all the boxes on the Trust Credit Score. So, and if you also, like this podcast and you think, man, I'd like to be on that podcast, I've got some things to say, call me, the Trust Energizer, and let's get you up here and let's let you showcase why you're trustworthy. So thanks again. Great to have you here. There's a button on this that says subscribe. Please subscribe to this channel. We are 1 year old, 28 episodes in, and the Change Energizer Hot Seat podcast. Thank you for being with us today.